Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Shishin Roshi has talked a number of times over the years, both in Dharma talks and personally to me about the secret of Zen. Okay, the secret of Zen. So I think we're going to let the cat out of the bag and be sure that everyone on this call knows the secret of Zen. So that's what I'm going to talk about. Just be sure after today, don't tell anybody else what it is. We'll all be out of business here. But anyway, in the last couple of weeks, we talked about change a lot, and we talked about how our practice can help us deal with this very constantly changing dynamic universe that we're all in. And it throws lots of challenges our way. We have to transition, our health is transitions, our job may be, our loved ones may be going through things. We have deaths in the family. We have new life coming into the family. All these things can be quite dramatic and sometimes very joyous. Some of the transitions, sometimes painful, and it's the proverbial, 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows that we all experience in this life. Not always easy to deal with all of that. So we talked about that. And then last week, we talked and focused more about how doing this, we talked about in the first week then how practice can help us with some of that, dealing with that. But then the last week, we talked about how practice itself, how our very practice changes us. So, and that's a really key thing to be aware of too, and to just gain this understanding that not only is our practice helping us deal with what at times can seem to be out there, all this change that is uncontrollable, and we're having to try to do our best to wrestle with it and deal with it, and practice can help with that. But then at the same time, to be aware that as we're really practicing, and as we get a more and more mature practice, one we've just been working at longer and longer, it becomes that we see that we're changing as well. We're experiencing these changes. And this practice, as we've talked about a bit in the last couple of weeks, it's like I say, it's not easy. It's not easy. And what we're really doing in practice is having this direct experience as best we can of what's really going on, rather than escaping or fantasizing about it. We're really experiencing these things directly, instead of going to fantasy land or drugs or whatever things we like to do to try to escape. And that's probably also the focus with practice of being able to actually deal with reality head on, and really experience this very moment and each moment just as it is. It's probably why Zen practice is not like super popular in the Western world or just in the world in general, because it's not easy to take on life in its own terms, as opposed to being able, knowing that we can always hit the escape hatch. We can always do drugs or alcohol or whatever pastimes we might have to try to break up things that just seem too challenging at times. And we've all been there and experienced some of that. That's for sure. Anyone that's living has. So because of that, over time, many practitioners, many people that have Zen as a pretty big part of their life, may even say that it is their life, they quit, they drop out, and that's certainly okay. Just like it's okay to begin a practice, right? Either one's okay, but it's not necessarily easy to stay with it as we go through all these things in life. Very easy at some point, just life is too much, and maybe go try some other options for being able to deal and experience life without trying to take it on, not instead of just being here with whatever comes up and trying to really embody that and experience that. So in the secret of practice, then, the idea is really, really simple. And the secret of practice is to help us have a fulfilling, rich life, not necessarily an easy life, but a life that is really accepting everything that life has to offer, including things that we may think from a limited basis, from an egoic standpoint, that these things are not good, that shouldn't have happened, but they do happen. So how do we part of practice is being able to accept whatever is coming up. And so the secret of practice is, there you go, just keep going, right? And Shishin Roshi talks about that a lot. Well, there's a reason he talks about it a lot. It's a way to not only continue with our practice, but have this very rich practice and rich life, in my experience. So when I first heard that term, just keep going, that phrase, I thought of one thing. I thought of, okay, what he's saying is don't quit. Don't quit. When it gets tough, don't quit. Okay. May not want to sit on the cushion, but don't quit. May not want to come to hear a Dharma talk, but just don't quit. Just keep trying to be present as best we can. Whatever it is, just don't quit. Okay. And that was the first way I took this idea of just keep going. This idea of not quitting. To share a story with you, I saw a show where they interviewed this. I think it was on PBS actually. They interviewed this admiral who is retired now, and he had spent all this time in the Navy. He had been in special forces. He had been, as he was working his way up through the ranks, he had been a Navy SEAL, and anyway, so he'd had this long, very successful military career, and he was just being interviewed about that. But one of the things he told a story about is he said when he was a Navy SEAL, and what kind of some of his experience about it. But he also said that people still come up to him, some young like recruits, and they'll say, "Hey, I want to be a Navy SEAL for whatever reason, and I know that you do a lot of, you have to be a very good swimmer, you have to be really strong, you have to be able to move fast, all these things. What is the most important thing in my training to kind of get ready for the tryout, if you will, of becoming they do I think it's like a 2-day experience where they weed out most of the candidates because it's just incredibly difficult physically, some of the things they're asked to do. But anyway, he said, so what's the best way I could prepare for that? He said, should I work more on my swimming? And the guy said, this admiral said, no, it's not going to help you. And he said, how about my strength? Is that going to be the thing? Because I hear you have to carry like boats around and stuff during these tryouts overhead and do some incredibly things that require a lot of strength. No, that's not gonna help you. And then what about so running, swimming, strength? He says none of that's gonna help you. If there's one thing you have to be able to do if you're going to become a Navy SEAL. And the guy goes, well, what is that? He said, don't quit. You just don't quit. And I guess the way the thing is set out, I think it's in a beach outside of San Diego or something, and they go through all this physical heck, to put it mildly, for a couple of days. And then anytime you want to, you can walk over and they have a bell, and you can ring the bell. You get to do it as the participant. Nobody does it to you. And you ring the bell, and then you're out. No shame, no anything. The great majority of all the people are gonna ring out of this audition, if you will, to be a SEAL. But you can do it. And it's kind of like that in practice, right? Practice is really hard. We don't have a bell to ring, but we can just split. I know a lot of people that I've practiced with through the years, and in no way am I judging them at all, because there are plenty of, certainly have times in my life where it's like, dang, this is hard. I don't really know that I want to feel this viscerally, all this stuff going on right now. Maybe I'd rather just go, take a walk or whatever I do to clear my head a little bit. Absolutely that. So that I'm not judging any of this at all, but I just have noticed that through the years, lots of people quit, and doesn't mean they don't have rich, wonderful lives after they quit Zen, but they just quit, whatever. So I think probably one of the reasons that Roshi talks about, if there is this possibility, I think, from my own experience, of having some very fundamental transformation happen in our life if we stay with this process. And it's not necessarily a quid pro quo thing. Well, if I do this for so long, I'm going to get this. I get this carrot, or that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about more what I talked about last week is this change that we go through, this kind of fundamental change on what we are, the way we perceive things, if we stay with it to the best of our ability with this practice. Okay, so then one of the little bit other times when I was reflecting on this idea of just keep going, another way I thought of looking at that it came up for me was don't get stuck. So don't just keep going, doesn't just mean don't quit, but don't get stuck in a particular situation. My mom, she had two brothers die. I think she was about 10 years old, something like that. And they died within 6 weeks, or 6 months of each other, 6 months of each other. And her older brother, who was, I think, 20 at the time of his death, she idolized him. He was an amazing guy. He had all these, he was super bright. He was a concert violinist at a young age. Did all these, and he was very kind to her, and she loved him so much. And it devastated her when he died abruptly. And then, not long after that, 6 months later, her little brother, he was 6 or 7, I think, and he got a brain tumor, and he died. It was inoperable, and he died. He was dead within just 6 months after her older brother died. And I remember her telling me this story, and I remember, she had tears coming down, and she was quivery voice, and this was when she was obviously quite old compared to being a little schoolgirl of 10 or whatever. And but what I later realized, I heard her recount this story quite a number of times in my life, and she never got over that. And I think most of us don't really get over grief of any kind completely. There's still a hole. There's still something that we're dealing with. But we're able to, some folks are able to move on. They're able to still find joy in life and yet still carry, it's not that they don't still have some of this with them of whatever kind of loss they experienced. But my mom, she was a wonderful mom in many ways, and she did the very best she could, but boy, she never got over that, and it greatly affected her in all kinds of ways, and it affected even how she was a mom, in different ways. So she was stuck, and again, I think we all get stuck from time to time. Some of us deal with particular what we could perceive as tragedies or things, and it's very, very difficult. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but most of us are going to experience some pretty significant challenges in our life and sadness if we live long enough, right? And again, the Jack Kornfield thing about the 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows that anybody experiences, I think is it's at least that. Another thing I wanted to talk about, so that having this awareness of getting stuck, and not just like an example with the grief like my mom had, but it can just be that we just think we're not really good enough as a Zen practitioner. We shouldn't be feeling this way. One of the things I dealt with a lot in my life, and one of the things that brought me to practice, was anxiety, right? And so I would have anxiety on the cushion. I could have it off the cushion, these different situations. I could have anxiety when I was giving a talk. I could have anxiety, any kind of way, right? Driving, different things. And so lamenting the fact that I had anxiety and woe is me, and this sucks, and other people sitting in the Zen, I bet they're not anxious, and all that kind of stuff. That didn't serve me very well. And that was just kind of me being stuck in this, right? As opposed to just doing with it the best I can, and then keep try to keep up as the universe is constantly changing. My life is constantly changing, not getting stuck in one thing and missing out on everything that's going on around us. Sometimes, and by the way, I'll just say a couple things about that too. And that is this notion of this unfolding, that this moment is constantly unfolding. And sometimes, you'll hear, and I've said this, that there's not even a fixed moment, then changes to the next moment, that changes to the next moment. There's nothing fixed at all. This moment that appears to be fixed isn't even fixed. There's just flux going on. Well, I was looking at re-looking at something I saw that Joko Beck, Dharma Ant, wrote, and it has to do, she talks about trying to get that idea across about flux. She did it, well, first I'll compare it to something that I've heard myself say before, and certainly heard this a lot through the years, is that things in life, they come up, and thought, this could be true of thought stories, where they arise, they persist for a while, and then they fall away. Right? They arise, and so maybe you have a thought in the cushion, or you're having a thought, right? It comes up for a while, it doesn't, and then it goes away. But way Joko explained it, which I thought was made an impact on me, was that, well, maybe it's more just an arising, like this moment's arising. Now it's another moment. Now it's another moment. It's always arising. It's unfolding. You don't know how it's going to unfold. There are cars going by outside. I can see. I'm lifting my water mug here. There's all kinds of stuff going on. Sounds weird, and it's all unfolding. But it's really just an arising. You can actually make the point. And for me, this is helpful. Rather than things come up, they persist for a while, and then they fall away. Is that even that what we perceive as persisting, that's more arising. It's not really anything persisting. It's just arising, or you could say unfolding, however you want to. But I don't know. For me, I find this notion of continual arising helpful, because I can't wrap my head around that. I can wrap my head around things come up, they exist, and then they fall away. That's kind of neat and tidy. But that's not necessarily what I've experienced in my life around some of the challenges in my life. It's just the drinking from a fire hose. Constant arising. It's like, hey, time out. Can we turn down that fire hose for a minute? That's kind of what I think of sometimes when I think, well, it's going to stay the same for a while, and then it's going to fall away. It may kind of, my perception, feel that way sometimes, but I think a more accurate reflection, for whatever reason, my practice is this idea of constant arising. So that's another way of looking at this keeping going, that there is this constant arising. That's what we have. That's what this is. So we keep going, getting back to Roshi's point about just keep going. Another thing I wanted to mention today is this idea of dry spots in practice. And to be able to just keep going, we need to be able to practice through our dry spots. Well, what's a dry spot? Well, I believe I read this term, maybe other people have used it, by Ezra Bida, the Zen teacher. And he was talking about in his own practice, there were periods where he just didn't want to be practicing. He didn't want to sit. He didn't want to go to Dharma talks or the Sangha or whatever. And I hope I'm quoting him pretty accurately, but this is the gist of it. And so he went through dry spots, and then he talked about kind of how he dealt with dry spots. Well, I've never had super strong dry spots where I just I want to chuck the whole thing, but I've certainly had times when I'm less interested in sitting or doing my practice as other times. And then I've had times when I really feel a lot of energy around it, and man, I'm just so grateful to be able to really throw myself into whatever is coming up that day, right? Or to experience it deeply. So the reason I bring up dry spots, you may not have them, you may have them, but it's just something not to be afraid of or scared of. It's just that's kind of life, right? Things ebb and flow. And so just be aware of it, and not to overthink if you do have a little period of a dry spot or a big period of a dry spot. I've known people that practice and then quit for 13 years, and then they came back and were very, very serious practitioners. So that was just something they went through that was part of who they were and what they are, and probably serves them in some ways very well. They tried some things, some different things, then they came back to this. Because one thing, well, I'll come back to this other point later. I want to talk another thing about just keeping going, and that is being able to stay aware, being able to stay aware of what's going on. And so I want to do a little exercise, and y'all that are at home, you can do this exercise right along with us, whether you do it, in your own home or you're doing it here today in the meeting room. Doesn't make any difference. So let me just take you through this short exercise, and it's about again this notion of just keep going. Well, to really keep going, we got to be aware of what's going on, right? We don't want to just be asleep at the wheel all the time, because everything's changing. We want to be aware. Okay. So how do we do that? How do we keep going with our awareness? So the first thing I'd like you to do is just close your eyes, and I want you to focus with your eyes closed on your hands. Just focus on your hands right now. Okay, next I want you to focus on your nose. Just focus on your nose. Okay, now what I want you to do is I want you to focus on your portal vein in your body, your portal vein. Okay, now you can open your eyes. And I want you, whether you're at home or whether you're here in the meeting room here at Maitreya Abbey, I want you to raise your hand if you were aware of your hands when I asked you to focus on your hands. Okay, see that? Thank you. Now I want you to raise your hand if you were aware of your nose when I asked you to do that. Okay. Now I want you to raise your hand if you were aware of your portal vein. Yeah. Okay. So what I noticed here was that a number of you were able to have awareness of your hands and of your nose, but not many of you were able to be aware, you thought, of your portal vein. Portal vein is something in your body associated with the liver. I won't go into it, but because I don't know much about it. but anyway, the point is, you all actually were perfectly aware, and you were aware through this entire exercise, because you were either aware. Let's take the nose as an example. We don't have to use just the portal vein example. You either were aware of your nose or you weren't aware of your nose. But if you weren't aware of your nose, that's still awareness. You're aware you weren't aware. And that's the thing with the portal vein. You thought, oh, I'm not aware. Nobody raised their hand, but you actually were. You're aware that you're not aware. Okay, that's a big deal. That's a huge thing, because you're not going to be aware completely of all things, minutia. It's too much. It's a universe. It's ever changing, all that. But you can do your best, right? You can do your best. And sometimes your best is going to be realizing that you weren't very aware of in this situation. You have that awareness. And as your practice continues and evolve, I don't really like the word evolves, but as you stay with it, you're going to have more and more times you think, oh man, I said something and I think it might have really created some hurt feelings with this person. I really wish I wouldn't have done that. And then, rather than beat yourself up about it and get stuck, you could be aware that you have this feeling that don't feel very comfortable in your body about how you can't know for sure, but you may have hurt this person's feelings, right? You just have an awareness of that. And you don't have to belabor it. If you choose to, you could go apologize and say, hey, I said some things I don't feel good about. I wish I wouldn't have said that, and whatever. You could apologize. Absolutely. But the important thing is, can you also forgive yourself? And can you not fixate on it? You don't want to be like my mom with losing her two brothers and really kind of couldn't even come close to letting that go. It affected her in so many ways. And so we have a lot of what we'll perceive as smaller issues and challenges that come up in our life, but they're important too, and they can really clog us up if we don't begin to let some of those things go. Because the fire hose is still coming at us. We still got to drink from the fire hose, all this change. So not getting completely stuck in any of these things so that we can't move on. So one of the things that I've heard in my work is that and heard from our grief counselor, director, and therapist. She talks about working with people where it can be they're dealing with this really, really overwhelming grief, right? And it just seems, and it affects their life in so many ways. It's so disruptive and making it so difficult to work with. But that ultimately, some people, not everybody, but to a certain extent, are able to realize that this is my life. I lost my husband, I lost my wife, I lost the precious child, I lost whatever kind of things, or I'm just aging and I just can't do things I used to be able to do, or I've gotten sick and I'm young, but I'm still dealing with it. So can I deal with that? Can I still have an okay life? Because it's the life I got. Am I going to just be tormented, or am I going to be able to be sort of kind of okay with all of it? Shishin Roshi's mentor was Bernie Glassman. He was a well-known Zen master. Wrote some books and was quite, as I say, quite well known in Zen communities. And one of the things he talked about, which relates to this notion of, so what do we do when our life is so tough? How can we deal with that? How can we just realize and accept that it's this way so I can make the best of it? And he talked about taking, we all have different abilities, we all have different challenges, but how can we take our different abilities, our different skills, our different experiences? In other words, take all the ingredients of our life, all of them, and make the best meal possible. Okay? And then make the best meal that we can possibly make with our life skills and our ingredients, if you will, and then make the best meal and then give it away. Just give that away. No charge for that. Freely give it in all of our dealings and all of our interactions, things like that. And that's a little bit like some folks that are dealing maybe with a particular loss of a life, somebody that they've known and loved and so intimately for so many years, and that person now they think they're no longer around. They can't, and it's just crushing them, right? So what are they going to do? Can they still got ingredients to their life? Can they make the best meal possible, right? The very best, and give that away. Another thing related to this is there's a journalist, David Brooks, and I don't know, he's been on a lot of different shows and public TV, and he would comment on the world situation. But he also is a person that's interested in, from what I gather, on our connections, kind of this tapestry of our lives. And one of the things he said, and I'm paraphrasing absolutely, but one of the things he said, in his life, he definitely prefers happy times, right? Like most of us. but he said that really kind of what has defined him as an individual, things that have really shaped what he is today, much more than the happy times, from his perspective, have been the trying times, the difficult times, the challenging times. And that's, again, and I don't want to be Pollyannish about it, but as we go through, and we all will, difficult times, and you never know when it's going to happen, particularly the Dharma wheel turns on a dime, right? Things can be so, this is easy right now. Everything's so wonderful, it's blissful. And then very shortly, something could happen, and very big disruption. A very big disruption can occur in your life. There's a notion, we hear about it in Zen and spirituality quite a bit, this notion of a container. Like some people may be sitting here today and think, whether in your own home or sitting here or just being part of this call, that we have a really safe container. It's a really safe container. And thank you, people will say, like, thank you for maintaining this container. Okay. This place where we can come and feel safe and be honest and open and sharing and loving without feeling like we're going to be attacked or at risk or whatever. And I hear that a lot. And I've said it. But in reality, in one sense, yeah, it's a safe container, but ultimately, there's no absolute, we can't control really anything. So even within a safe container, and this is something that I certainly appreciate, having this place to practice, whether it's in here at the Abbey or whether it's you all in your own home or whatever, there's still a lack of control. You still don't know, things can interrupt this safe container too, right? Okay. And that's just part of this continuous arising, right? Or if you want to think of arising, persisting for a while, changing way. But the idea of container is, and I have absolutely found this to be true, the more we practice and the more we are able to deal with difficult things in our life, the more the container grows. Okay? So imagine if you were slinging, you had a can of paint or a paintbrush, and you're in a closet, a small closet, and you're just flicking around the paint in the closet. It's going to get paint all over the walls, right? All over you, all over. It's going to be a mess, right? But then imagine that you're just out in space, just total out in outer space, and total hypothetical here, but you have this paintbrush and you're just flicking it around all over the place, right? Well, it's not going to make things too messy, okay? It's a pretty big universe, okay? So it's a bit like that when thinking about this container. And so as you have more and more challenges in life, more and more difficulties, things that really transitions that cause a lot of pain for you, but you somehow deal with it. You somehow deal with it to the best you can. Not perfect, but you do the best you can. Then the walls of this container, right? They expand, and certain things then may not bug you quite as much as they did. They don't seem so horrific or woe is me or terrible or anything, because all of a sudden you've dealt with some pretty big things and you realize, oh, I can deal with that. Oh, I don't have to constrict so much. I can open up more. And one of the things I've noticed as I've gotten older with people I know that are also older, and I've also noticed this even when I was a kid. I remember my dad telling me, my dad was a minister, and he told me that when he was still relatively young, that he said when people get older, they either get more open and they seem to be able to handle ups and downs more easily, or they get more constricted. They get bitter even, right? Just really constricted. Right? And so that's also this notion that kind of the container that I think a lot of people, as they get older, they get a bigger container and they are able to appreciate more things that they couldn't have appreciated before. And we can do that in our practice too. See, we're dealing with things, we're not running away from it. So it can push the walls out of the container. It's very painful to go through it. if it's a real significant issue we're dealing with. Very painful. But as we do that, we can, instead of retreating and thinking, oh my God, I can't take it, this is so, we can do with it the best we can. No grade card here. We just do the best we can. And over time, we may find that things get a little bit more spacious. And not only in our ability to deal with difficult things, but I mean literally get more spacious. Like, oh, wow. You're just walking outside, being in this room, whatever. Just be more aware of space. Like we talked about, I think I mentioned this either last week or the week before. It's an analogy that a lot of people use, but this idea of this mug, right? Without the space, it wouldn't be a mug, would it? If there weren't space around it, there wouldn't be a mug, and be no place for the water to go. I can't even really conceive exactly what it would be if there were no space. Guess I wouldn't be talking, for one thing, if there were no space. But anyway, so we come more and more of space. Most of, as far as I can tell, right? Most of this existence, this moment, is space. Most of it is. However we want to think of space, but just kind of know it when we maybe can't define space, but sort of know it as we experience it. So, want to bring this to a close and give you all a chance to share from your own experience, that's for sure. But I come back to this fact that, so we do the best we can. We just, as Shishin Roshi says, the secret of Zen is to just keep going. And if we just keep going, that's good enough. We just do our best, keep going. It doesn't have to be some idealized picture of what our life as a Zen student or Zen practitioner would be. Just living our life, just showing up, being as aware as we can be, experiencing things in our body as best we can be, experience these sorrows and these joys as best we can. That's enough. And that is our practice. And that is this, for me, that is this notion of just keep going. The best I can. Sometimes other people probably look at it and go, I'm afraid that's not good enough, but I'm doing the best I can. I'm not going to just quit. At least I'm not going to today. Been doing it for 25 years. Maybe tomorrow I'll quit. Anything could happen, but my thought is I want to just keep going. And so I tend to close a lot of talks this way, that just because I want to be sure that we all are aware that every moment is this life of the Buddha. That's what we're living the life that Shakyamuni Buddha lived, right? And that does include things like eating, taking a sip of water out of the mug, peeing, pooping, brushing our teeth, booting our computers, having an argument, losing temper, saying I'm sorry, accidentally hurting somebody's feelings, or even on purpose doing it. All that stuff is this life, and that is our Buddha life. It's not different, right, than that. So we do the best we can, and to the best of our can, we just keep going. Thank you.